Bandicoot Retrospective. Press start to begin.
The year is 2002, and we are now seeing the release of the first ever handheld Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure, also known as Crash Bandicoot XS, on the Gameboy Advance. This game spawned from a deal between Universal Interactive Studios and Konami, stating that Konami would have publishing rights to Crash Bandicoot games in order to end Crash's Sony exclusivity. Universal wanted to make clear that Crash was theirs. One of these games included in the deal was to produce a game for the Game Boy Color, which quickly turned into the Game Boy Advance when that came out. At that time, a small-time studio pitched their Game Boy Advance programming technology to Universal in order to be taken on by them. This small-time company was Vicarious Visions, who showed them a prototype for what played like a handheld Crash game. This was how Vicarious Visions was put on to develop the first ever handheld Crash game. Will Crash Bandicoot find success on the Game Boy Advance, or will Crash have a rough transition to 2D? Let's find out. Once again, Uka Uka is tired of Cortex failing to take over the world, but this time, Cortex has a plan that cannot fail. Cortex creates a machine called the Planetary Minimizer and shrinks the entire planet Earth to the size of the whole titty. Why am I so fucking cringe? That's right, in this game, Cortex actually kinda wins. Crash and the others see this and try to get the 25 power crystals needed to power Coco's machine to get the planet back to its original size. Along the way, Crash beats all of Cortex's minions like Tiny, Dingodile, and Engine. Crash eventually goes back to his original size and meets up with Cortex for their final showdown. Cortex tries to shoot the Minimizer at Crash, but Crash makes him accidentally shoot it at the Minimizer's power source, the colored gems. Due to this, the Minimizer becomes highly unstable and ends up fusing Cortex, Engine, Tiny, and Dingodile into one horrifying monster named Megamix, who tries to chase down Crash before the space station goes down. Crash escapes in the nick of time, and Coco is able to grow the Earth back to its original size. Honestly, for the first handheld Crash game, this story is pretty good. I really like the idea of Cortex winning and taking over the world, and Crash having to stop him then. We haven't gotten that in a Crash game yet, so it's cool to see. Also, Megamix is such a cool idea that definitely deserves more praise. Making a final boss that isn't just Cortex or Uka Uka was a wildly creative idea. All in all, this handheld Crash game went above and beyond for their story. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure story gets my rating of an A+. Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure is literally just a 2D Crash game. You run, jump, spin, and get special abilities along the way. You'd think taking away a dimension of gameplay that Crash was born in would take away from the gameplay experience, but no, it's just as fun. Crash translates surprisingly well to 2D. Not only that, but this game does something that I really appreciate. It remembers that Crash Bandicoot is a platformer. Though there are still gimmick stages like the underwater stages and the helicopter pack stages, they are much shorter and there aren't as many. There are more platforming stages than gimmick stages. I think that contributes greatly to how fun this game is. This game has a lot of that original Crash 2 flair, even without that third dimension. It's simple, yet really fun, and the controls are just as responsive as you'd expect. Even the boss fights aren't that bad. Nothing uniquely spectacular, but serviceable boss fights. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure's gameplay gets my rating of an A+. For a Game Boy Advance game, the sprite work is really incredible. Going full circle, they ended up taking the Donkey Kong Country route when it came to the characters and enemies in this game, and turned the 3D models from Crash 3 into 2D sprites. It translates really well to the Game Boy Advance. Like, shockingly well. Interestingly enough, there isn't a single song in this game that's original. A lot of the music in this game sounds like MIDI versions of songs from Crash 2 and 3. Honestly, this kinda gives off the vibe of this game being more like a fan game rather than from the official property, but the results weren't ear-grating. I'm just wishing I could be hearing the originals. One weird observation that I had while playing this game has to do with the boss themes. The 3 bosses that appear in this game are Tiny, Dingodile, and Engine, and all of their themes are present from Crash 3. What's weird about it is that they're all swapped around. Tiny has Dingodile's theme, Dingodile has Engine's theme, and Engine has Tiny's theme. I have no idea why they did this. Was it a mistake? Was it slight foreshadowing for Megamix? Who the hell knows? Either way, the presentation of this game is pretty good, all things considered. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure's presentation gets my rating of an A. Ready for the same song and dance? To complete Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, you must get all 25 crystals, all 29 gems, and all 20 gold relics in the game. Just like Wrath of Cortex, most if not all of the box gems can be acquired the first time you enter a stage. This time, it's more completionist friendly because they constantly show you how many boxes you have. Some may find this annoying, but I find this incredibly helpful as it's a constant progress marker. Obtaining the relics is just as frustrating as it usually is. Thankfully, once you get the running shoes, getting gold relics are pretty much a piece of cake. It'll still take a bit of effort, but not too much. Plus, I'd say that getting the completion bonus is pretty much worth it. Getting all of these collectibles will award you with 100% completion and unlock the true final boss of the game, Megamix. Megamix's boss fight is less of a fight and more so a chase sequence. This level is pretty difficult and gets pretty damn hectic to get through, especially with the monster right behind you like that. But it's cool, and this is the first time we got awarded with more game for taking time to complete it. I'd say the completion journey is worth taking on this one. Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure turned out a lot better than I would have expected. With a story that's really cool and does a lot of interesting things with the Crash formula, gameplay that remembers why Crash was so great, impressive presentation for the Game Boy Advance, and a completion journey that gives you more than any Crash game before it, Vicarious Visions really did a stellar job creating a game that's not only good, but as good as the original trilogy. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure gets my overall rating of an A+. Who knew the first ever handheld Crash game would be so good? Like the Crash Retrospective, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode. We also have merch in the description below where you can get our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. I'd like to give a special shout out to Andrew's Retro Games for being the most well-esteemed guest of them all. You could also become a channel member to get all of these videos when I'm finished editing them as opposed to when they're scheduled to come out. Next week, we'll be looking at the next Crash game in the lineup, Crash Bandicoot 2 Entranced. With that, I'm Bottles, and I bid you, my well-esteemed guests, adieu.